The late afternoon sun in Los Angeles tinted the horizon with a metallic orange, reflecting off the glass walls of the penthouse where Arthur moved about with a crystal goblet in hand. The atmosphere exuded a suffocating luxury, decorated with arrangements of exotic flowers and illuminated by chandeliers that cost more than the entire lifetime of many present. Men in Italian suits and women draped in jewels moved like pieces on a game board, trading rehearsed smiles and empty remarks about the financial market. Between waiters gliding silently like invisible shadows and magnates laughing loudly to mask their own boredom, Arthur felt the weight of his armor. At 45, he was the pinnacle of success, the ruthless CEO of a tech giant. But his cold, distant eyes did not share in the sparkle of the lights. He was an island surrounded by an ocean of superficiality, where each person's worth was measured strictly by the digits in their bank accounts. The celebratory atmosphere, however, was merely a convenient facade for a public relations strategy Arthur deeply despised. He needed to maintain the appearance of a philanthropist to placate investors after a quarter of aggressive decisions that had decimated smaller competitors. The contrast was brutal. On one side, polished marble and the scent of expensive perfumes. On the other, the view of the grey industrial zone stretching below the balcony, where factory smoke mingled with hidden misery. Arthur felt a latent contempt for the charade, for to him, charity was nothing more than a soulless business transaction. He believed success was the exclusive result of brute force, ignoring the fact that his own coldness was a reflection of deep scars from a childhood marked by rejection and a desperate need to prove he was not the nobody his former neighbors said he would become. The event was interrupted by the need for an official visit to a decaying social project located on the edge of a landfill a few miles away. As he stepped out of his armored sedan, Arthur caught the acrid stench of chemical waste and decomposing trash, an odor that assaulted senses accustomed to filtered air conditioning. It was in this desolate setting that Leo, a 10-year-old boy wearing a t-shirt 3 sizes too big and with a face smudged with soot, approached with a hesitant step. The boy did not carry a cup to beg for alms, but rather a crumpled piece of paper held with a reverence that seemed out of place amid the filth. Leo's blue eyes shone with a stubborn hope, a light that seemed to insult the grey rigidity of Arthur's world. The boy extended the paper, trying to pierce the protective bubble surrounding the billionaire, ignoring the looks of disgust from the aides who accompanied him. The scene reached its breaking point when Arthur's personal security guard, acting with mechanical brutality, shoved Leo aside with a rough gesture, sending the boy falling to his knees on the uneven asphalt. "Get out of here, kid. Don't." "Bother Mr. Arthur," the guard snarled as Leo curled in on himself, shielding his face with thin arms. The drawing the boy was holding slipped from his hands and drifted through the air, landing squarely on the CEO's impeccable leather shoes. Arthur looked down and saw a detailed sketch of an engine drawn with a mathematical precision astonishing for a child. Before turning to get into the car, he heard Leo's trembling voice ask, with a dignity money could not buy, "Do you think this engine could work?" That simple, direct question echoed in the emptiness of Arthur's chest, freezing him in place. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. Arthur remained motionless for a few seconds, his gaze fixed on the paper at his feet, ignoring the impatient urgency of his aides. As he bent down to pick up the drawing, he realized that the back of the sheet contained something even more striking. A school report card marked with an A+ in mathematics, issued by a struggling public school. The handwriting was steady, revealing a Herculean effort to maintain order amid the chaos of poverty. In that instant, a painful memory struck him like a punch to the stomach, transporting him 30 years back. He saw himself in the same position, a thin, underestimated boy, being humiliated by teachers and neighbors who said he would never be more than a factory floor laborer. The silent determination emanating from Leo was a mirror, of his own lost essence, an emotional connection he had tried to bury beneath layers of cynicism and power. The billionaire ignored his secretary's outstretched hand and, in a gesture that shocked everyone, leaned down to help the boy up from the filthy ground. He brushed the dust off Leo's worn t-shirt with his own hands, feeling the fragility of the boy's shoulders, which trembled not with fear, but with restrained anticipation. "Who drew this?" Arthur asked, his voice stripped of its usual, cutting authority. Leo, regaining his posture, replied that he used discarded metal pieces from the landfill to build small prototype inventions. He explained that this particular engine had been designed to clean contaminated water from local streams, allowing families to have something decent to drink. The technical clarity of a 10-year-old's explanation disarmed Arthur's cold logic, revealing a raw genius hidden beneath the soot. Arthur ordered his team to cancel that afternoon's commitments, ignoring protests about the meticulously planned schedule. He walked alongside Leo to the small shack where the boy lived, a makeshift space of wooden planks and sheets of corrugated metal, where the only luxury was a shelf filled with physics books salvaged from the trash. There, amid the stench and absolute deprivation, Arthur grasped the magnitude of Leo's suffering. The boy was an orphan, surviving on the charity of an elderly, ailing neighbor. Leo's vulnerability was not merely material but existential, for he lived in a world that called him trash every single day. In those blue eyes, Arthur saw the spark of a future that would be crushed by bureaucracy and neglect if no one intervened decisively. In the days that followed, Arthur began a process of transformation that started on the outside, but soon reached the depths of his character. He decided to fully sponsor Leo's education at one of the most prestigious elite schools in the country, facing immediate resistance from his company's board. The directors saw the move as an eccentric whim of a leader who was losing focus on profits, labeling the initiative a waste of resources. Arthur, however, did not back down. He rented a decent apartment for the boy and hired tutors, but soon realized that money could not heal the trauma of abandonment. The weekly meetings between the two began rigidly, with short, awkward conversations about grades and academic performance, reflecting the businessman's emotional inability to deal with genuine affection. Over time, the barrier between mentor and protégé began to crumble, giving way to a paternal bond Arthur had never imagined experiencing. He started taking Leo to his personal laboratory at the company's headquarters, where the boy marveled at the cutting-edge technology now within his reach. "Do you really believe I can be one of them?" Leo once asked, pointing to engineers who had graduated from Harvard. Arthur felt a tightness in his chest, and for the first time in years allowed himself a genuine smile as he replied that Leo's intelligence was a force of nature no university could teach on its own. However, this newfound happiness was threatened by severe external obstacles, including the jealousy of classmates who mocked Leo's humble origins, calling him the garbage kid in the school's luxurious hallways. The tension escalated when a former social worker, known for her corruption and history of extortion, emerged from the shadows to complicate the boy's legal situation. She spotted an opportunity to profit from Arthur's fortune and began creating bureaucratic obstacles, claiming that the businessman had no biological ties to exercise guardianship. At the same time, the company's board initiated a move to remove Arthur from the presidency, using his obsession with the boy as evidence of mental instability. Arthur found himself at a dangerous crossroads. His financial empire was at stake, and the only person who made him feel human risked being sent back into the broken foster care system. The fear of failing as a protective figure began to paralyze the man who had once feared nothing. Leo sensed the pressure his presence placed on Arthur's life and began to withdraw, believing he was the problem that needed to be removed so his mentor could regain peace. In an emotionally charged conversation one late afternoon in the penthouse, the boy suggested that perhaps he should return to the outskirts. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me," Leo said, tears in his eyes that he tried to hide. Arthur sat beside him, setting aside his impeccable suit, and confessed that his life before the boy had been a desert of glass and steel. He explained that wealth without purpose was nothing more than dead weight, and that Leo had given him the chance to redeem a past of loneliness he carried like a prison sentence. The months that followed were marked by a grueling battle against bureaucracy and the social prejudice that insisted on labeling Leo by his origins. Arthur spent millions in legal fees to ensure the corrupt social worker was exposed, but the psychological damage to Leo had already been done. The boy felt like an imposter in a porcelain world, a feeling intensified by constant bullying from classmates who refused to accept a landfill intruder in their midst. Arthur realized that material comfort was not enough. He needed to teach the boy to build his own armor of self-confidence. He began devoting his nights to helping Leo develop his water filtration prototype, working side by side with grease and electronic components, turning the luxurious penthouse into an improvised laboratory. This physical and emotional closeness unearthed traumas Arthur preferred to ignore, such as the absence of his own mother and the harshness of a father who valued only results. In watching Leo, he saw the chance to break the cycle of generational coldness that had turned him into a corporate robot. Their bond became the core of their lives, but external pressure continued to gather like a storm on the horizon. Arthur's company was on the brink of a multi-billion-dollar merger, and investors demanded that he distance himself from any personal scandal or excessive philanthropy. He was pressured to choose between the biggest deal of his career and the moral commitment he had made to the boy who had saved him from his own insignificance. Leo's emotional health took a blow when he discovered that some classmates were planning to sabotage his project at the International Science Fair, the event he saw as his only proof of worth. Arthur tried to comfort him, but the boy was convinced that fate would always find a way to push him back into the hole he had escaped. "People like me don't win, Arthur. They're only tolerated for a while," Leo confessed in a moment of deep despair. Arthur realized that words would not be enough. He needed an act of real sacrifice to show the boy he was loved unconditionally. The conflict between corporate duty and paternal love reached its peak on the eve of the great event. The corrupt social worker made one final attempt at extortion, demanding an exorbitant sum to refrain from pursuing a false accusation of neglect against Arthur. The CEO, who once would have solved the problem with a coldly signed check, decided to confront the criminal in court, even knowing it would bring negative exposure to the company at the moment of the merger. He was willing to burn his reputation if it meant protecting Leo's integrity and dignity. The risk was absolute. If the case failed, he would lose both the presidency and custody of the boy. That night, Arthur did not sleep, reviewing Leo's engine components and the legal documents, fully aware that the next day would define the rest of their lives. The day of the International Science Fair dawned under a thick fog, mirroring the uncertainty hanging over both protagonists. Arthur received an ultimatum from the board. If he did not attend the final merger meeting at 10 a.m., he would be dismissed for cause. Leo, meanwhile, stood in the event pavilion, trembling before judges from several countries, bearing the weight of representing not only himself, but the hopes of all young people living on the margins. The stage was set for the climax of a lifetime of struggles. Arthur glanced at the gold watch on his wrist, and then at a photo of Leo laughing the first time the engine worked in. The lab, the choice had been made. At the center of the convention pavilion, surrounded by cutting-edge technological projects and skeptical glances, Leo froze in front of his prototype. Minutes before his presentation, he discovered that the main circuit of his filtration machine had been cut and its calibrated components deliberately damaged by envious hands. Panic rose in his throat like poison, and the cruel words he had heard on the streets of the landfill echoed in his mind. They were, "Right, I'm nobody. I'm just the garbage kid." Meanwhile, on the 30th floor of the company's headquarters, Arthur faced a boardroom full of impatient shareholders, ready to sign the contract that would double his personal fortune. Yet his heart was miles away, beating in sync with the fear of a boy he now called his son. Without uttering a single word of explanation to his partners, Arthur rose abruptly, leaving behind the gold pen and the multi-billion-dollar contract under the stunned gazes of his peers. He ran through the lobby, ignored the frantic calls on his phone, and personally drove through the city's heavy traffic, propelled by an urgency he had never felt in any market negotiation. When he arrived at the event, he found Leo quietly crying behind the booth, his grease-stained hands desperately trying to repair the severed wires. The contrast was absolute. The most powerful man in technology kneeling on the floor of a public pavilion, soiling his $10,000 suit to meet the pain of a child the world insisted on discarding. Arthur picked up a tool from Leo's kit and, with a calm that contrasted with the surrounding chaos, began working on the circuits beside the boy, ignoring camera flashes and the murmurs of the crowd. Leo sobbed, saying it was better to give up because failure was his destiny, but Arthur cupped his face with oil-stained hands and looked deeply into his eyes. "They're only right if you stop now, Leo, and I never stopped for you, because you are the only real thing I've ever built in my entire life," the businessman declared, his voice thick with emotion. In that moment, Arthur's icy armor melted completely, revealing a father willing to burn his own empire to ignite a spark of hope in the heart of an orphan. Working in perfect synchrony, as if they were a single soul, the two rebuilt the filtration engine under the watchful eyes of judges approaching for the final evaluation. Leo, inspired by Arthur's unshakable presence, wiped away his tears and took control of the demonstration, explaining with passionate eloquence how that technology could save thousands of lives in forgotten communities like the one where he was born. Silence filled the auditorium as muddy, contaminated water entered the machine and emerged on the other side, crystal clear, pure, and full of life. The transformative moment came when the chief judge asked who was responsible for the innovation, and Leo, holding Arthur's hand, proudly replied that the project was a reflection of someone who believed in him when he was invisible. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. Leo's victory at the science fair was only the prelude to a far deeper revolution in both of their lives. The positive resolution of the story did not come from the trophy he received, but from a concrete shift in paradigm. Arthur used his influence to dismantle the social workers' corruption network and, in a moving hearing, formally finalized Leo's adoption. The courtroom, usually a place of legal coldness, became the stage for an embrace that sealed the end of loneliness for a man who had everything and a boy who had nothing. Arthur's mansion, once a monument to isolation, was transformed into a vibrant home, where hallways now echoed with laughter and debates about new inventions, symbolizing the family reconciliation they both so desperately needed. Arthur's transformation was reflected in his empire, which evolved from an aggressive, profit-driven machine into a foundation focused on discovering and refining hidden talent in underserved communities. He founded the Leo Institute, a technological innovation center aimed at low-income youth, proving that a man's wealth is measured by the impact he has on the lives of others. Arthur was no longer the CEO feared for his coldness, but a respected mentor who smiled with his eyes, finding purpose in every scholarship granted and every sustainable project funded. The change was visible in the corporate environment, where empathy became as important a value as revenue, humanizing a structure that had once been purely mechanical. Leo flourished under Arthur's care, becoming a confident young man who never forgot where he came from, using his story to inspire others still living on the margins. The foundation became a beacon of hope in the grey industrial zone, replacing the despair of the landfill with an open laboratory where human potential was treated as the most precious resource on Earth. The conclusion of that journey of suffering was the creation of a new lineage, not of blood, but of spirit and shared purpose. Arthur finally understood that his fortune only gained real value the moment he chose to invest in the improbable, allowing the light in a child's eyes to illuminate his own darkened soul. The story ends on a hopeful note, showing that the cycle of rejection was definitively broken through an act of courage and human connection. The moral is clear and resonates in every gesture. A person's destiny is not determined by where they are born, but by the hand that chooses not to let go. True human value lies in potential invisible to prejudiced eyes, and love is the only currency that never depreciates. Arthur and Leo proved that when material wealth meets emotional poverty and chooses to serve it, the result is a transformation that transcends generations. Their lives are now a testament that second chances are not only possible, but necessary for the evolution of the world. 15 years passed, and the setting is now the Grand Auditorium of the United Nations. Leo, a grown man and a world-renowned engineer, steps onto the stage amid thunderous applause to receive the highest sustainability award for his water purification technology, now used on a global scale. In the middle of his speech, he pauses, looks to the front row where an elderly, visibly emotional Arthur watches him, and dedicates the prize to the father who dirtied his hands with grease so he would not give up. The cycle closes when, as he leaves the event, Leo notices a child holding a simple drawing on the sidewalk. He stops, kneels to the child's level, and asks, with the same spark in his eyes as before, "Would you like to tell me how this works? Have you ever done an act of kindness that changed a life?" Comment, "Love has no price," if you also believe in human kindness. Subscribe for more stories of second chances. Would you like me to create a different premise or perhaps adapt this script for a specific video format?